The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. So this is the fourth day of the November 2022 sesshin at Mountain Gate. And Mitra-roshi is indisposed at the moment, so we'll have a short Dharma talk today. I hope it's helpful. This sesshin, Roshi's been talking a lot about koans and providing an overview of koans, generally how to work with them. And so today she asked me to talk a little bit about my experience with koans and how to work with them in practice and how it's been for me in practice. And I've told the story a few times about how I came to practice. When I was young, I had a sense that there was something more to life than I knew at that time, and I really wanted to find it. I knew it involved a search, and all I had to do was be really, really quiet inside, and I could find it. So I would sit outside and just listen to life itself, become as one with things as I could. I spent a lot of time in nature doing this. When I would first wake up in the morning, especially on the weekends, I would just lay there quietly, just listening and questioning, just quiet, like an internal quiet search. And I kept doing this as I grew older. It became harder and harder to feel like I found the answer to my search on some level. But I kept trying, and I knew there was something more. And so eventually when I did find Zen practice, I felt like it was what I had been looking for, and it felt easy in some ways to apply that questioning since I had been doing it for a long time. And I had a natural koan as well. I had always felt that there was more to who I was than a small girl from the Midwest, and so I had a natural question about who I was. So eventually when I met Mitra-roshi, she gave me my natural koan, which is who am I, to work on, and that was really inspiring to me. She mentioned earlier in sesshin about how when things are painful, that's when we're really driven to question, and when things are going great, we tend not to feel so driven to question as much, and that was definitely true in my life as well. I did have significant early trauma, and one of those later in my early life traumas was my mother dying in a car accident when I was 21. And that I had already felt very compelled to find the answer to my koan, but once she died, everything else just fell away in importance. I didn't quit college. I was in college. I didn't quit, but I didn't do one of my independent study classes. I just didn't do it. Luckily, I had an understanding professor, but I spent all of my spare time just searching and sitting. And that led me eventually also after graduation to wanting to do residential practice. And so I continued the search then. And it took me a really long time to really find that answer. And it's not like the search ever stops anyway, because there's always so much more to see and so much deeper to go. I feel even silly saying that because it's so clear that I'm very much at the beginning of that road, but in terms of the process of finding the answer to any koan, you know, it starts with determination, even when it feels like you don't have determination. If you're sitting and you're practicing, you have determination and persistence. Even when it feels like you don't have persistence, the fact that you're still around in Zen practice means you have persistence. And going beyond perceived barriers really helped too. I did a lot of yasa. There's a koan where a monk asks a teacher about what is the truth of Zen, and he says, sitting long and getting tired. And that's a big part of it, just on a basic level, is just a lot of sitting, or at least that's how it was for me. I just had to sit and sit and sit and sit for a long time. And part of why it took me a long time is because I had a lot of internal psychological barriers. Like I mentioned, the early childhood trauma and the later childhood trauma basically didn't stop. I had to process all of that to a pretty major extent before I could really start to see things how they were or how they are in reality. It took a long time for me to be able to open to that because I had so much fear to open to, anxiety and traumatic memories to process. So there's an integrative healing aspect to Zen practice, which can help that. I think probably better than any other healing system in the world. Susokan really ties together the parts of the nervous system that are splintered by trauma. So it has a unique power in that. But it can't be done without psychotherapy either. So I did a lot of psychotherapy too. So I combined the two processes. I combined really intensive Zen training with trauma processing therapy, and over time healed the trauma. There's always more to do, I think, with that trauma healing, but it's significantly healed at this point. And once I got to a certain point where the internal barriers had been healed, then I was able to go much faster in the sort of Zen barrier side of my practice. And all of the work that I did at the beginning, and still do, on any remaining psychological barriers, but all the work that I did at the beginning to work through psychological stuff did give me the power, maybe you could call it, to penetrate the Zen barriers to the extent that I've been able to so far. It's like there's no, and Roshi says this all the time too, there's no work that we do in our practice that's wasted. It always contributes to the path, even when it doesn't feel like it is. And so I don't think I should say a whole lot about subsequent koans, but I wanted to talk just about how it was for me for a long time, working on the inner barriers to understanding my first koan to enough of an extent that I could work on subsequent ones. I think I could probably talk some more, but maybe it would be more interesting if people have questions. We could talk about that.
When you say your first koan, are you talking about the natural koan, or were you assigned another first koan?
Yeah, thanks. Justin was asking if my first assigned koan was my natural koan, and actually, Roshi did first I can't remember, but I think she asked if I wanted to do the face before your parents, my face before my parents were born, or the natural koan I had, which is Who Am I? And I think I think it was my choice, and I chose Who Am I? And I'm glad I did, because it really gripped me, and it really inspired me for a long time to keep going, because I knew that there was an answer that I could find to that question. The Mu koan for me just seemed out there, and I didn't care about it. So I'm glad she didn't assign that one. And I didn't care that much about actually the other koans either. I had enough natural drive to relieve suffering, relieve my own suffering and that of others. I felt the bodhisattva vow on some level always, I think, throughout my life. But the Who Am I question really did grip me and help me keep going on for the long haul with it. And I have to say, one benefit of working with a teacher that that has really high standards, I guess. I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, but she definitely doesn't let me ever sit in a place that feels comfortable, or she always encourages me to go much deeper and won't accept anything. She won't accept any answer that isn't at the depth that needs to be, which I really appreciate. I think it's important for anybody who's practicing to work with a teacher like that, so that Zen doesn't degrade over time, which it can do if that full experience is not required of each person at the depth and in all the dimensions that it needs to be seen at. I hope that makes sense. And the integrative aspect too, that's something Roshi has always talked about, and I've personally found so important in my life, is integrating the practice into every aspect of life, every interaction. I work with people for a living, so every interaction I have with my clients, any interaction I have with people at the Zen Center, with any, just life itself, how I respond to life itself is my koan all the time. And I think that leads to just a richer, deeper experience of life, and a deeper level of freedom. That is what I've, always wanted. That's what I've always wanted out of practice. And so I personally feel inspired to keep going in that direction, and I keep reaping the benefits of it. And hopefully it's helpful to other people too. And that integration and that working on oneself throughout a lifetime of practice is really important, because it is possible to compartmentalize a little bit, and you can answer koans on a certain level in Sanzen and then go out in the world and not really live it. Although I don't know how that works, because Roshi would never let me do that, so I don't know. I just understand that theoretically that can happen, and I don't want that. I see the benefit of integrating it always, and always working on any patterns that come up, patterns of negativity, irritation, judgment, anxiety, just any pattern that I bring up that causes pain and suffering for myself and others is something that I want to root out, and instead live from a place of understanding where it's not necessary to produce those patterns of thought or speech or action. And Roshi calls it the long maturation, and yeah, it just never ends, which sounds like a long slog, and it kind of can be feeling that way at times for sure. But when the vista opens up after having carried a heavy load up the mountain, it always seems it always feels worth it. So if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can't think of really anything else to say about this topic today.
Thank you, Shannon. This was very interesting and fun.
All right, well, it's great sitting with everybody as usual. It's very inspiring, and thanks for listening.